Welcome back, everyone. Hope you're settling in nicely as we explore these peaceful Minecraft landscapes together. The audacity is breathtaking when someone steals what you've rightfully earned, especially after years of dedication and sacrifice. There's something uniquely satisfying about watching karma catch up to those who abuse their power. They basically dug their own grave and tripped into it. When workplace politics cross ethical lines, the fallout can be spectacular and far reaching. It's almost like watching a villain monologue before slipping on a banana peel of their own making. The best revenge doesn't require elaborate planning, just patience and the right opportunity. We've all fantasized about exposing someone who wronged us, but few get the perfect chance that today's story delivers. Our first tale follows someone who discovered their boss's darkest secret right when they needed leverage the most. After years of 80-hour weeks and sacrifice weekends, they were promised the senior manager position until everything changed. I've been with Meridian Technologies for almost 9 years now. It's one of those corporate tech companies where promotions don't come easy, but I was fine with that. I've always believed in earning my place through hard work and dedication. For the past 4 years, I've been eyeing the senior manager position in our department, working 80-hour weeks, sacrificing countless weekends, and even canceling 2 family vacations just to meet deadlines. My boss, Janet, had been dangling this promotion in front of me for years. Just one more big project, she'd say. Just help us land this client. And I always delivered. Last quarter, after successfully launching our biggest software update that increased revenue by 37%, Janet finally called me into her office. "You've earned it," she told me with that practiced corporate smile. "Once the fiscal year ends next month, the senior manager position is yours." I've already spoken to HR about the paperwork. I nearly cried right there in her office. 4 years of sacrifices were finally paying off. I spent the next few weeks reorganizing my entire life around this promotion. My partner and I even started looking at houses in better school districts since we could finally afford it. I drafted proposal documents for changes I wanted to implement in my new role. I was ready. Then came the company-wide email that shattered everything. "Please join us in congratulating Melissa Porter on her promotion to Senior Manager of Product Development." I had to read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Melissa Porter? The same Melissa who'd only been with the company for 2 years? The same Melissa who took 3 weeks of vacation last quarter during our critical launch? The same Melissa who just happened to be Janet's happy hour buddy? I immediately marched toward Janet's office but stopped myself before reaching her door. Making a scene wouldn't help. Instead, I took a deep breath, returned to my desk, and typed up a polite email requesting a meeting to discuss my career trajectory. Two could play the corporate game. Janet's response was textbook gaslighting. "There must have been a miscommunication. I never guaranteed you the position, only that you were being considered." Melissa brings fresh perspectives to the team. Fresh perspectives? The woman needed my help to format basic spreadsheets last month. For the next 2 weeks, I maintained the perfect mask of professionalism. I congratulated Melissa, offered to help with her transition, and continued performing at my usual high standard. But behind that mask, I was meticulously documenting everything. Every email, every project contribution, every instance where my work had been critical to the company's success. This wasn't just about a promotion anymore. This was about respect and integrity. If Janet wanted to play dirty, I needed to be prepared. It was about a month after the promotion disaster when fate handed me an unexpected opportunity. I was working late, as usual, finishing a report that Melissa should have handled. The office was practically empty at 9 p.m. on a Thursday. I needed some files from the shared drive that only management had access to, and Melissa had given me her login information to make things easier. Translation, do her work for her. While navigating through the folders, I accidentally clicked on Janet's personal drive instead of the department one. I was about to back out when a folder labeled Miami Conference caught my eye. That conference had been scheduled for 3 days, but Janet and our CFO, Michael Dawson, had both been gone for nearly a week. The official story was extended business meetings with potential investors. I knew I shouldn't look. This was crossing a line. But after what Janet had done to me, my moral compass was a bit flexible. I clicked on the folder. What I found wasn't business proposals or investor presentations. Instead, there were dozens of emails between Janet and Michael spanning the last 6 months. Emails that made it abundantly clear they were having an affair. Michael, who often brought his wife to company functions. Michael, who had 3 kids and a family photo prominently displayed on his desk. Can't wait for our business trip next week. Megan thinks I'm presenting at the conference all 3 days. Booked us the oceanfront suite. No one from the company will know we're even at the same hotel. Had to make up an excuse for the lingerie charge on the company card. Told accounting it was a gift for a client's wife. LOL. They had even discussed their strategy for keeping their relationship hidden, with Janet mentioning that's why she had to give Melissa the promotion instead, because I was too observant and might notice something. So that was the real reason I'd been passed over. Not because of merit, not because of fresh perspectives, but because I might have discovered their inappropriate relationship. My hands were shaking as I forwarded these emails to my personal account. This was corporate dynamite, but what would I do with it? I'm not usually vindictive, but this felt different. They hadn't just cheated me out of a promotion, they'd made a mockery of the values the company claimed to uphold. And here's where it gets absurd. The next day, an email went out announcing the annual holiday party, scheduled for the following Friday. It mentioned that spouses and partners were encouraged to attend, with a special call out that Michael's wife Megan will be coordinating the charity raffle again this year. That's when a plan formed in my mind, a plan that would either backfire spectacularly or deliver the most satisfying karma I'd ever witnessed. I created an anonymous email account and carefully selected the most damning exchanges between Janet and Michael. I included screenshots of their romantic getaway plans, the inappropriate charges to company accounts, and the explicit messages they'd exchanged. Then I sent it all to Megan Dawson's personal email, which was listed in the charity raffle announcement. The timing was perfect, exactly 2 days before the holiday party. Long enough for her to process what she'd discovered, but not so long that she'd cool down before seeing them in person. I spent those 2 days in a state of nervous anticipation. Had Megan received the email? Would she confront them publicly or handle it privately? Had I just made the biggest mistake of my professional life? The night of the holiday party arrived. I dressed carefully, trying to appear normal, despite feeling like I might throw up from nerves. I arrived a bit late intentionally, wanting to make sure all the key players were already there. The atmosphere seemed normal at first. Festive decorations, open bar, colleagues in their party attire mingling around high-top tables. I spotted Janet by the wine station, looking confident in a red dress. Michael was across the room with his arm around Megan, who was smiling and chatting with other executives' spouses. Wait, they looked fine? Had Megan not seen the email? My stomach sank. Maybe she didn't check that account, or my message went to spam. Maybe, if you've made it this far into the chaos, you're as addicted to Reddit drama as I am. Make sure to subscribe and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Now, let's get back to our office revenge saga. My thoughts were interrupted by the clinking of a glass. Our CEO was preparing to make his annual holiday speech. Everyone gathered around, drinks in hand, smiling expectantly. I positioned myself where I could see both Janet and the Dawsons. That's when I noticed something odd. 2 men in suits I didn't recognize were standing near the exit, watching the crowd intently. They weren't drinking, weren't socializing. They were just observing. The CEO was halfway through his speech about another successful year when Megan Dawson suddenly stepped forward. "I'd like to add something if I may," she said, her voice calm but tight with controlled emotion. The CEO, looking slightly confused, nodded and stepped aside. Megan took his place and surveyed the room, her eyes eventually landing on Janet. I want to thank Janet Williams for making me aware of my husband's extracurricular activities, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the now silent room. The email detailing their 6-month affair was quite comprehensive. The hotel receipts, the explicit messages, the misuse of company funds. It was all very thoroughly documented. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Michael went pale while Janet looked like she might faint. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. Michael, Megan continued, turning to her husband, the divorce papers are being delivered to your office on Monday. And Janet, she turned back, I've forwarded everything to the board of directors. I believe misuse of company funds for personal affairs falls under the category of embezzlement. With that, she walked out, head held high, leaving stunned silence in her wake. The two men I'd noticed earlier approached Michael and Janet. They weren't random guests. They were from corporate security. The fallout was nuclear. By Monday morning, an emergency all-staff email announced that Janet had been demoted 3 levels down for inappropriate workplace relationships and misuse of company resources. Michael had taken indefinite family leave. The rumor mill was working overtime, but surprisingly, no one suspected me. Why would they? I was just the person who got passed over for promotion, not someone with access to private emails. 3 weeks later, I was called into HR. I walked in expecting a routine meeting, maybe some questions about the department restructuring that was happening after Janet's demotion. Instead, I found our CEO and the head of HR waiting for me. We've been reviewing the department's performance metrics from the past 4 years, the CEO said. Your contributions have been consistently outstanding. In light of recent management changes, we'd like to offer you the senior manager position, effective immediately, with back pay to when the position was initially filled. I managed to keep my expression neutral as I accepted, but inside, I was doing cartwheels. When I got back to my desk, an email from Melissa was waiting. Her resignation letter, effective in 2 weeks. Karma really is the best revenge. I didn't set out to destroy Janet's career or Michael's marriage. They did that to themselves. I just made sure the right person saw the evidence. Was it morally questionable? Maybe. Do I regret it? Not for a second. Sometimes when you've been wronged, justice finds a way of working itself out. You just have to be patient enough to recognize the opportunity when it presents itself. But if you thought workplace drama was intense, wait until you see what happened when friendship and marriage collided at the worst possible moment. Melissa and I had been friends since elementary school. We were inseparable growing up, sharing secrets, clothes, and even our first sips of stolen alcohol in her parents' basement when we were 16. After high school, life took us in different directions. I stayed in our hometown to attend the local university, while Melissa moved across the country to pursue her acting dreams in Los Angeles. We kept in touch through occasional phone calls and social media, but that daily closeness faded as we built separate lives. When James proposed, Melissa was one of the first people I called. Despite the distance and time apart, having her stand beside me on my wedding day felt important, a connection to my past as I stepped into my future. She seemed genuinely excited when I asked her to be a bridesmaid, immediately promising to fly back for dress fittings at my bachelorette party. I wouldn't miss this for anything, she told me. I can't wait to meet the guy who finally won your heart. The first time Melissa and James met was at our engagement dinner, 6 months before the wedding. I remember feeling so happy seeing my oldest friend and future husband finally in the same room. James was his usual charming self, making sure everyone felt included in conversations. Melissa seemed to appreciate his efforts, laughing at all his jokes and asking him questions about his work in architectural design. It was only as the night progressed that I noticed something odd. Melissa kept finding reasons to touch James's arm or shoulder when talking to him. She'd lean in a bit closer than necessary when he spoke. I brushed it off as Melissa being her usual extroverted self. She'd always been more physically demonstrative than me. Over the next few months, Melissa made 3 more trips to town for wedding preparations. Each time, she'd suggest including James in our plans. "Let's have James join us for lunch after the cake tasting," she'd say. "Shouldn't we get the groom's opinion on these flower arrangements?" Again, nothing I could definitely point to as inappropriate, but there was an underlying intensity to her interest that made me uneasy. When I mentioned it to my sister Kate, she gave me a look. "You've noticed it too, right? She barely talks to anyone else when he's around." I decided to casually mention it to James one night. His response was immediate dismissal. "Honey, she's just being friendly. She doesn't know anyone else here except you, and she's trying to bond with your future husband. Isn't that what you'd want?" Put that way, my concerns seemed petty and insecure. I decided to trust James and give Melissa the benefit of the doubt. After all, we'd been friends for 20 years. Surely I was just being paranoid. The wedding week arrived, and Melissa flew in early to help with last-minute preparations. That's when things started getting more obvious. She'd find excuses to pull James aside, asking his opinion on her toast, needing help with her luggage, wanting recommendations for local restaurants. At our rehearsal dinner, I caught her showing James something on her phone, both of them laughing before quickly separating when they noticed me approaching. "Inside joke," Melissa explained vaguely. "I was just showing James that meme about architects." That night, I confided in Kate again. Am I overreacting? Because it feels like she's flirting with him. Kate's expression turned serious. "You're not imagining it. I've been watching her, and it's definitely weird. Want me to say something?" I declined. The wedding was the next day, and I didn't want drama. Melissa would fly back to LA soon, and everything would return to normal. I just needed to get through the next 24 hours. Our ceremony went perfectly. Walking down the aisle to James's tearful smile felt like everything I'd dreamed of. We exchanged vows, had our first kiss as a married couple, and headed to the reception at the Grand Hotel downtown. I was floating on air, surrounded by loved ones celebrating our commitment. The reception began wonderfully. We had our first dance, enjoyed dinner, and listened to heartfelt toasts, including Melissa's, which was surprisingly appropriate and touching. As the night progressed, I relaxed. Maybe I had been overthinking things. Maybe Melissa really was just being friendly. Then came time for the cake cutting. The wedding planner gathered everyone around the cake table, but James was nowhere to be found. I checked the bar, the restroom entrance, even stepped outside to see if he was getting some air. No sign of him. "Has anyone seen James?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light despite the growing knot in my stomach. That's when Kate appeared at my side, slightly out of breath. "Emma, I think you should check the garden terrace. Now." Her tone told me everything I needed to know. With my heart hammering in my chest, I made my way through the ballroom to the glass doors leading to the terrace. Kate followed close behind, along with my maid of honor and 2 other bridesmaids who sensed something was wrong. The terrace was dimly lit with string lights and mostly hidden from the main reception by large potted plants. As I rounded the corner, I stopped dead in my tracks. There was James pressed against the stone wall with Melissa leaning into him. Her dress was partially down her shoulders, her hands on his chest, her lips on his neck. For a split second, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It felt like watching someone else's life implode. Then rage washed over me, pure clarifying anger that cut through the shock. I grabbed a full champagne bottle from a nearby service table and closed the distance between us in seconds. James's eyes widened when he saw me, his mouth opening to speak. I didn't give him the chance. I popped the cork and unleashed the spray directly at both of them, drenching Melissa's carefully styled hair and James's rented tux. "What the actual hell is happening here?" I demanded, my voice rising enough that heads were turning at the reception inside. Melissa stepped back, adjusting her dress with a shocked expression that quickly turned defensive. Emma, this isn't what it looks like. Oh, really? Because it looks exactly like my so-called friend is trying to hook up with my husband at our wedding reception. James pushed himself away from the wall, his expression panicked. Emma, she ambushed me. I came out for air and she followed me, started saying crazy things about how she's always had feelings for me. Liar, Melissa cut in, her face flushing. You've been texting me for weeks. You told me your engagement was a mistake. By now, a small crowd had gathered at the terrace entrance, including my parents, James's parents, and the wedding planner, who was frantically trying to usher curious guests back to the reception. Show me, I said, holding out my hand to James. Show me these supposed texts. Without hesitation, James pulled his phone from his pocket and unlocked it. Look through everything. There's nothing because I never texted her. I scrolled through his messages. Nothing to or from Melissa except group texts about wedding logistics. I then turned to Melissa, who was now visibly fuming. Let me see your phone, I demanded. This is ridiculous. I don't have to prove anything, she snapped, clutching her purse tighter. Kate stepped forward then. Actually, I think you do. Unless you want security to escort you out right now? The threat worked. Melissa reluctantly handed over her phone. What I found was worse than I expected. Not only were there no compromising texts from James, but I discovered a folder of screenshots in her photos labeled with my name. They contained conversations with two other women whose names I recognized as Melissa's friends from LA. Just another boring bride completely clueless about her man. Challenge accepted. Bet I can get him to kiss me before the reception ends. Same wager as last time. This one might be harder. He seems actually into her. But they all break eventually. My hands were shaking as I read the messages. You've done this before, I said, my voice oddly calm, despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. This is some kind of sick game to you. Melissa's expression shifted from defiance to something uglier. Please, like you deserve someone like him anyway. You've always had everything handed to you. The perfect family, the perfect hometown life. Some of us have to fight for what we want. The hotel's security team arrived, summoned by the wedding planner. I handed them Melissa's phone. Please escort this person out. She's no longer welcome at my wedding. As security led her away, Melissa's composure completely shattered. He wanted me. Ask him about the night after your engagement dinner. Ask him what really happened when he drove me back to my hotel. I turned to James, my heart in my throat. He looked me directly in the eyes, his expression open and pained. Nothing happened. I dropped her at the hotel lobby and left immediately. I swear on everything I love, on you, on our future together. Nothing happened. Later that night, after somehow managing to salvage the reception and cut the cake with forced smiles, I learned from another bridesmaid that Melissa had tried this exact same thing at 2 other weddings. She'd successfully broken up one engagement and caused a major rift in another marriage. Apparently, the rush of stealing someone else's partner had become her twisted hobby. I'd like to say the rest of our wedding night was magical and we laughed off the incident, but that would be a lie. We spent hours talking, with James repeatedly assuring me nothing had ever happened between them. I believed him, but the trust I once took for granted now felt fragile, requiring conscious effort to maintain. The weeks following our wedding were difficult. I lost not only a friendship I valued, but also a certain innocence, that confident belief that I could judge people's characters accurately. We postponed our honeymoon, opting instead for couples therapy to work through the insecurities and trust issues that surfaced after the incident. It's been 5 years since our wedding day. James and I are still together, stronger in many ways for having weathered that storm so early in our marriage. We have a 2-year-old daughter now and a relatively normal life. Melissa occasionally appears on my social media suggestions, always with a different partner, always presenting a perfect life. I sometimes wonder if she's still playing her games. I wish I could say I've completely moved past it, but the truth is more complicated. I'm happy in my marriage and I trust James completely, but I'll never again trust so easily or completely in friendship. Some betrayals leave permanent marks, invisible but always present, reminding you to guard what matters most. Speaking of trust being shattered, you won't believe how one sister turned a baby shower into a complete nightmare. Tyler and I had been together for 3 years when things started falling apart. We'd met during my senior year of college at a mutual friend's party, and I fell hard and fast. He was everything I'd been looking for: smart, ambitious, with a dry sense of humor that matched my own. By our 6-month anniversary, I'd moved into his downtown apartment, and we'd settled into a comfortable rhythm. But after 3 years, that comfort had transformed into something more concerning. Tyler began staying later at work, spending weekends with his friends instead of me, and generally creating distance between us. When I tried to talk about our future, he'd change the subject or give vague, non-committal answers. I started finding receipts for dinners I hadn't been invited to and smelling unfamiliar perfume on his clothes, all the classic signs. Then came that awful Thursday night when he sat me down on our couch with that serious look I'd grown to dread. "Ali, we need to talk," he began, already making my stomach drop. "I think we should take a break. I'm not sure this relationship is working anymore." I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. Tyler wasn't just my boyfriend, he was my entire life plan. We'd talked about marriage, kids, buying a house in the suburbs. I couldn't imagine starting over with someone new, going through all those awkward first dates and insecurities again. "Is there someone else?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "No, it's not that," he replied, though his eyes darted away from mine. "I just think we want different things. You're ready to settle down, and I'm realizing I might not be there yet." Panic surged through me. I couldn't lose him. Without thinking, the words tumbled out of my mouth. "I'm pregnant." His head snapped up, eyes wide with shock. "What? Are you serious?" I nodded, committed now to the lie. "I found out yesterday. I was going to tell you this weekend." The transformation was immediate and startling. Tyler moved to sit beside me, taking my hands in his. "Why didn't you tell me right away? This changes everything." And just like that, our breakup conversation became a discussion about doctor's appointments and nursery colors. By the end of the night, Tyler had not only decided to stay, but had proposed with his grandmother's ring that he apparently had been keeping in his sock drawer for the right moment. I told myself I'd figure it all out later. Maybe I'd actually get pregnant right away, and this lie would become a weird little secret I'd keep forever. Or maybe I'd fake a miscarriage in a few weeks after Tyler had recommitted to our relationship. Either way, I just needed time to secure things between us. The next morning, reality hit hard when Tyler called both our families to share the wonderful news. My parents were overjoyed about their first grandchild. Tyler's mum cried happy tears, and my sister Emma, always the practical one, immediately started planning a baby shower. "It's early, Em," I protested weakly during her congratulatory call. "Maybe we should wait until the second trimester?" "Nonsense! This family needs some good news, and I'm going to make sure my niece or nephew gets the welcome they deserve." For the next few weeks, I maintained the charade with increasing difficulty. I bought pregnancy books and left them conspicuously around the apartment. I downloaded a pregnancy app and made a show of tracking my symptoms. I even started eating pickles, which I hate, because that's what pregnant women are supposed to crave, right? Meanwhile, my period came and went, unnoticed by Tyler, who was being uncharacteristically attentive. He'd transformed overnight into the perfect partner, bringing me tea, offering foot rubs, talking excitedly about our future. The guilt was crushing, but his renewed love was like a drug I couldn't give up. At my supposed 8-week mark, I realized I needed to show some physical changes. Late one night, I ordered a silicone pregnancy belly online, along with some maternity clothes. I researched how to fake morning sickness convincingly and studied websites about pregnancy symptoms so I could discuss them knowledgeably with our increasingly excited families. And here's where things took a bizarre turn. Rather than becoming more anxious about maintaining the lie, I found myself almost believing it. I started having imaginary conversations with my fictional baby. I caught myself protectively touching my still flat stomach in public. When Tyler and I discussed names, I had genuine opinions and emotional reactions. The fake belly arrived, and I began wearing it under loose clothing. Tyler's face when he first noticed my bump was so full of love and wonder that I almost confessed everything right then. But the moment passed, and the lie grew bigger. Emma's baby shower plans, meanwhile, had exploded into an extravaganza. She'd rented an event space, ordered custom decorations, and invited every female relative and friend we had. The RSVPs poured in, along with early gifts sent by relatives who couldn't attend, tiny clothes, handmade blankets, sentimental keepsakes meant to be passed down to the child I wasn't actually carrying. That's when everything unraveled. I came home one day to find Tyler assembling a crib in our spare bedroom. "Isn't it too early for this?" I asked, panic rising. "Your mum said we should get the nursery ready early while you still have energy," he replied cheerfully. "Besides, I couldn't resist after seeing it on sale. Our little one deserves the best." Our little one. The fiction had taken on a life of its own, and I was losing control of the narrative. I needed an exit strategy, but every potential solution seemed worse than the last. If I faked a miscarriage now, it would devastate Tyler and both our families. If I confessed, I'd lose everything. Tyler, my family's respect, possibly even my relationship with my sister, who was pouring her heart into this shower. So I did what any cornered animal would do. I doubled down. I started wearing the fake belly more prominently, bought a bigger size, and leaned into the performance. I practiced my pregnant walk and perfected looking nauseous at the mention of certain foods. I became a caricature of pregnancy, and shockingly, everyone bought it. The day of the baby shower arrived, and I felt like I was walking into my own execution. Emma had outdone herself: balloon arches, a professional photographer, catered food, and a mountain of gifts. 30 women cooed over my fake bump while I smiled through mounting nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy. "Time for games," Emma announced after lunch, clapping her hands excitedly. "But first, a toast to my sister and the journey of motherhood she's beginning." The guests raised their sparkling cider glasses, while Emma disappeared into the back room. She returned carrying a small gift box wrapped in silver paper. "A special gift for the mom-to-be," she said, placing it in my hands with an expression I couldn't quite read. I unwrapped it slowly, aware of all eyes on me. Inside was a pregnancy test, not a new one in packaging, but an actual used test with a single pink line indicating "not pregnant." "Take it now," Emma said loudly, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "Since mine showed positive this morning, but I'm not even dating anyone." I stared at her, blood draining from my face. "What are you talking about?" Emma's eyes were cold. "It's interesting, isn't it? I've never even missed a period, yet somehow I knew exactly what morning sickness feels like. I knew exactly what websites to check about faking miscarriages." She pulled out her phone and turned the screen toward the room, displaying screenshots of my Amazon orders and browser history. "My sister isn't pregnant," she announced to the stunned crowd. "She never was. The bump is silicone. The symptoms are fake. It's all been a lie to trap her boyfriend." The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. I looked desperately for Tyler, who had been helping in the kitchen. He stood in the doorway, a cake server still in his hand, his face a mask of confusion that slowly morphed into understanding and then rage. "Tyler, I can explain," I started, but he just shook his head, put down the server, and walked out without a word. My mother was crying. Tyler's mum was already on the phone, presumably with him. The guests began awkwardly gathering their things, avoiding eye contact with me or my family. And through it all, Emma stood there, arms crossed, watching the chaos she'd unleashed. When the last guest had fled, my parents approached me, their faces a mixture of disappointment and concern. Why? Was all my father could manage. He was going to leave me, I whispered, tears streaming down my face as I pulled out the silicone belly and dropped it on the gift table. I panicked. What followed was one of the lowest periods of my life. Tyler refused to speak to me, sending a friend to collect his things from our apartment. My parents insisted I return every gift and write apology notes to each guest. I had to face the humiliation of explaining to my employer why I suddenly wasn't taking maternity leave after all. But nothing hurt more than Emma's betrayal. Yes, I had lied, massively, terribly, but she had engineered my public destruction with cold precision. You could have confronted me privately, I told her during a tense family dinner weeks later. You didn't have to embarrass me in front of everyone we know. You embarrassed yourself, she shot back. I just made sure you faced consequences for once in your life. It came out that Emma had suspected the truth almost immediately. Something about my story didn't add up, and being my sister, she knew my tells when I was lying. Rather than confront me, she'd installed a tracking app on my phone during a family dinner and had been monitoring my online activity for weeks, collecting evidence. Who does that? I demanded. Who spies on their own sister? Who fakes a pregnancy? She countered. We were both right and both terribly wrong. It took 2 years of therapy, both individual and family sessions, before Emma and I could be in the same room without tension. I had to face some hard truths about myself, my codependency, my fear of abandonment, my willingness to manipulate others to avoid pain. Emma had to confront her own issues, her resentment toward me, her disproportionate response to my deception, her inability to show compassion even when deserved. Today, we're speaking again, though our relationship will never be what it once was. Some extended family members still treat me like I'm radioactive at gatherings. Tyler is married to someone else now. I saw the announcement in the local paper last year. As for me, I'm dating again, cautiously. My therapist says I'm making progress, learning to sit with discomfort instead of running from it or lying to escape it. The hardest lesson was realizing that in trying to prevent losing someone through deception, I lost not only him, but also my integrity and the trust of those who truly love me. Some wounds heal, others just become part of who you are. While some family betrayals happen in public, others are discovered in the most devastating private moments, like when one person found out their parents had been hiding something unforgivable. College had been the light at the end of the tunnel for me since I was 8 years old. That's when my parents started the college fund, or at least that's when they told me about it. I remember my dad sitting me down after I brought home a perfect math test, his face serious but proud. This is why we're saving for your future, he'd said, showing me a bank statement with a starting deposit of $2,000. Every month we put money away for your education. By the time you're ready for college, you'll have everything you need. That promise shaped my entire childhood and teenage years. While my friends were getting the latest phones or going on spring break trips, I understood when my parents explained we were investing in my future instead. When I wanted expensive basketball shoes in middle school, Mum reminded me that the money was going towards something more important. I didn't mind the secondhand clothes or budget vacations. I was the responsible kid who understood sacrifice, and I kept my end of the bargain. I maintained a 4.0 GPA through high school, joined every academic club, and spent weekends volunteering at the hospital to strengthen my college applications. My parents beamed at every award ceremony and proudly told relatives how their investment was paying off. Senior year, all that hard work culminated in an acceptance letter from Westridge University, my dream school. The financial aid package included a partial merit scholarship, covering about 40% of the costs. When I showed my parents, they hugged me tight. "See, we told you it would all work out," my mum said. "Between your scholarship and the college fund, you're all set." The total cost after scholarships would be about $25,000 per year. My parents had been saving for 10 years, supposedly putting away $300, $400 monthly. Based on my calculations, there should have been at least $40,000 in the account, enough for my first year with money left over for sophomore year expenses. 2 weeks before the tuition deadline, I asked my parents about accessing the college fund. I needed to send the university a payment plan or full payment, and orientation was rapidly approaching. That's when the first cracks appeared. "We'll take care of it," Dad said, suddenly interested in his phone. "Don't worry about the details." "But I need to fill out these forms," I persisted. "They're asking how much we're paying up front versus financing." "Just put that we're paying in full," Mom interjected quickly. "We'll handle the transfer." Something felt off about their responses, but I trusted them. They'd never given me reason not to. Still, as the deadline drew closer with no confirmation of payment, my anxiety grew. 3 days before the money was due, I finally insisted on seeing the account myself. "I'm 18 now, and this is my education. I want to understand how the finances work," I reasoned. After exchanging a look I couldn't quite interpret, my parents reluctantly logged into their banking portal. Dad navigated to a savings account labeled College Fund and turned the screen toward me. Balance, 212.47. I stared at the number, certain it was a mistake. Is this a joke? Where's the rest of it? My parents launched into a convoluted explanation about temporary transfers and investment accounts. They promised the money existed but was just tied up at the moment. They'd take out a small bridge loan to cover tuition until they could access the investments. I might have believed them if my mother hadn't been picking at her cuticles, her nervous tell since I was little. Or if my father could look me in the eye. "Show me the investment accounts," I demanded, my voice surprisingly steady despite the panic rising in my chest. More excuses followed. The accounts were being consolidated. The statements were somewhere in the filing cabinet. They'd show me tomorrow after calling the bank. That night, after they went to bed, I did something I'm not proud of, but in retrospect was completely justified. I checked my dad's laptop. If there were investment accounts, there would be statements, tax documents, something to verify their existence. What I found instead was much worse. Dad's browser history was filled with online casino sites. His email showed hundreds of receipts from gambling transactions dating back years. There were desperate messages to payday loan companies, cash advance applications, and correspondence with credit card companies about increasing limits. I dug deeper and found a folder of scanned documents that made my blood run cold. Credit card statements for accounts opened in my name. 3 different cards, all maxed out, all delinquent. They'd been using my social security number to open credit lines since the day I turned 18. The next morning, I confronted them with what I'd found. The facade crumbled immediately. "We were going to pay it all back," Mum sobbed. "Your father just needed some time to hit a winning streak." Dad couldn't even look at me. "It started small," he mumbled. "Just a few dollars here and there from the college fund when we were short on bills. Then I started trying to win it back." The classic gambler's fallacy, chasing losses until you're buried too deep to see daylight. "What about my tuition? It's due in 3 days." That's when they unveiled their plan. I would take a year off. They'd declare bankruptcy to clear their debts, but not mine since those credit cards were in my name. And then they'd start rebuilding the college fund. The betrayal was so profound I couldn't even cry. These people who had preached responsibility and sacrificed to me my entire life had stolen my future and destroyed my credit before I'd even had a chance to build it. That evening, I called my grandparents, my mum's parents who lived about 2 hours away. Unlike my parents, they'd always lived modestly but comfortably on my grandfather's pension from 40 years at the electric company. I told them everything. The next day, Grandpa arrived at our house with a folder of his own. It contained printouts about identity theft, credit fraud, and parent-child financial abuse. He sat across from my parents at our kitchen table, his face a mask of quiet fury I'd never seen before. You have two choices, he told them, his voice steady. Either you come clean to Ashley about every debt in her name and help her file police reports for identity theft, or I'll help her do it myself, and you'll never set foot in my house again. Things went from bad to unhinged in those next few hours. My mother oscillated between hysterical sobbing and angry accusations that I was tearing the family apart. My father alternated between defensive justifications and pitiful apologies. They begged for another chance, promised impossible financial solutions, and even suggested I was overreacting. My grandfather never wavered. Every minute you spend making excuses is another minute Ashley falls behind on starting her life, he finally said, cutting through their protests. What's it going to be? In the end, self-preservation won out. My parents refused to file police reports that would implicate themselves, so my grandparents helped me do it myself. I filed identity theft reports with the police, the FTC, and all three credit bureaus. I documented everything: the cards opened in my name, the forged signatures, the collection notices they'd hidden from me. I moved in with my grandparents that same day, taking only what fit in my car. My parents blew up my phone for weeks, alternating between threats and tearful apologies, but I maintained my boundaries. This wasn't a mistake or a one-time lapse in judgment. It was years of calculated deception. The tuition deadline came and went. I had to call Westridge University and explain that I couldn't attend that fall. The admissions officer was sympathetic but couldn't hold my spot. My dream school slipped away. Instead, I enrolled in community college while working 3 jobs: mornings at a coffee shop, evenings waiting tables, and weekends doing data entry for my grandfather's friend's accounting firm. Every penny went toward rebuilding my future. The investigation into my parents took almost a year. In the end, they were charged with identity theft, fraud, and financial exploitation. They accepted a plea deal that included restitution, probation, and mandatory gambling addiction treatment. They filed for bankruptcy shortly after, losing their house, the house I grew up in. Some family members thought I was cruel for pressing charges against my own parents. Family should handle things privately, an aunt told me disapprovingly at a holiday gathering. I asked her if she'd be willing to loan me $40,000 to replace what they stole. She changed the subject. 5 years have passed since then. I completed 2 years at community college, transferred to the state university, and graduated with a degree in accounting. Ironically, I now help other people manage their finances. I worked my way through school, lived frugally with my grandparents, and graduated without a penny of debt. The fraud alerts eventually came off my credit report, and I've built my score back into the excellent range. My relationship with my parents remains complicated. After completing treatment, my father has maintained his sobriety from gambling for 3 years. My mother attends Al-Anon meetings for families of addicts. They've both apologized countless times, and I believe they're genuinely remorseful. But trust, once shattered, doesn't simply reassemble. We talk occasionally, have managed a few holidays together, but there's always an undercurrent of what happened. I don't think that will ever fully disappear. My grandparents became my rocks, my safety net, and my biggest supporters. They couldn't replace what was stolen, but they gave me something more valuable: stability and unconditional love without strings attached. When I graduated, my grandfather handed me an envelope containing a modest check and a note. "This isn't your college fund, it's your future fund. No repayment necessary, just pay it forward someday." Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd gone to Westridge, if I'd had the traditional college experience I'd worked so hard for. But I've made peace with my journey. The hardest lessons often make us stronger, and I learned early that sometimes the people who should protect you the most are the ones you need protection from. Family betrayal cuts deep, but in-laws can be even more devious, especially when they're willing to secretly record your most private moments. I knew Sandra was going to be a problem from the moment David introduced us. She spent that entire first dinner analyzing me like I was a suspicious mole that needed removing. Every question felt like a trap about my career. Oh, just marketing. How practical. My family, no doctors or lawyers, and even my ethnic background, which she couldn't quite place, despite me clearly stating I was half Filipino. Still, I put on my best smile and powered through because I loved David. He'd warned me his mother was protective, which turned out to be the understatement of the century. Sandra wasn't just protective, she was possessive, as if her son was still her personal property at 32 years old. When we announced our engagement 6 months later, Sandra's face went through a fascinating journey. Shock, dismay, forced happiness, and finally a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Well, this is certainly sudden, she managed, emphasizing the word like our relationship was a rash decision rather than two adults who'd fallen in love. At our wedding, she wore cream, almost white, despite David specifically asking her not to. During her toast, she managed to mention David's ex-girlfriend twice while referring to our marriage as David's new adventure. I chose to laugh it off. After all, we were married now. I'd won, right? The first year of marriage was relatively peaceful. Sandra lived about an hour away, so we saw her monthly for obligatory family dinners. She'd make occasional comments, asking when I'd quit my job to focus on family, or suggesting David looked tired because I probably wasn't taking proper care of him. I'd brush these off, changing the subject or responding with humor. David's tired because he chose to stay up watching basketball until 2 a.m., Sandra. Some things are beyond even my magical powers, I'd say with a wink, while David would squeeze my hand under the table in silent gratitude. I thought I was handling it well, maintaining boundaries while keeping the peace. David was caught in the middle, and I didn't want to force him to choose between his wife and his mother. So I tolerated her subtle digs and backhanded compliments, letting them roll off my back. I even vented to a therapist rather than burdening David with my frustrations about his mother. But things started changing about 2 years into our marriage. Sandra began showing up unannounced at our house, always with some excuse. She was in the neighborhood or had baked too many cookies. She'd insist on staying for hours, rearranging our kitchen cabinets or commenting on the dust behind the television. If David wasn't home, she'd just wait, making herself comfortable on our couch while I worked from home, pretending I wasn't irritated by her presence. That's when I first noticed something odd. Sandra was unusually attached to her phone, which wasn't typical for a 60-something woman who'd previously needed David's help just to send text messages. She'd place it face down on tables or counters in whatever room I was using, often forgetting it when she went to the bathroom or stepped outside. Initially, I didn't think much of it until the comments started. David's aunt mentioned how she'd heard I was struggling at work, something I'd mentioned only in the privacy of my own kitchen during a particularly stressful week. His cousin asked about our decision to postpone buying a house, referencing specific financial concerns David and I had discussed only with each other. A family friend inquired about my issues with David's sister, a complicated relationship I'd never discussed with anyone outside my marriage. Each time the information was slightly twisted, presented in the worst possible light. I was complaining about my job, we were having money problems, I couldn't get along with David's sister. The common denominator? All these conversations had occurred in our home when Sandra had been visiting. My suspicions grew, but they seemed so paranoid I didn't even want to voice them to David. Was his 64-year-old mother really secretly recording our conversations? It sounded absurd, like something from a bad soap opera. Then came the day I found the app on her phone. Sandra had actually forgotten her phone this time. Genuinely forgotten it. Not the forgetfulness that seemed suspiciously targeted. It was buzzing with notifications, and when I picked it up to bring it to her, I saw the screen flash with an alert from an audio recording app I recognized from my marketing work. Audio conversion complete. Kitchen, Tuesday, free to on MP3. A chill ran through me. I shouldn't have looked further, but fear overrode my sense of privacy. I tapped the notification, and there it was. A folder labeled DIL, daughter-in-law presumably, with dozens of audio files named by location and date. My hands shaking, I played one at random. It was me, talking to David about his sister's recent, passive-aggressive text message. I heard the front door open, Sandra returning for her phone, and quickly closed the app, placing the phone exactly as I'd found it. I felt violated, exposed, and utterly confused. Who does this? What was she planning to do with these recordings? I told David that night, half expecting him not to believe me. Instead, he looked heartbroken but not entirely surprised. She's always been controlling, he admitted. When I started dating in high school, she'd listen in on my phone calls. I caught her reading my journals once. I thought she'd grown out of it, but he trailed off, the implications of his mother's betrayal sinking in. We agreed to confront her together at our next dinner, but before we could, the recordings found their intended audience. The annual family reunion was held at Sandra's house that year, a large barbecue with about 40 relatives from both sides of the family. I'd been dreading it already, but nothing could have prepared me for what Sandra had planned. After lunch, she called for everyone's attention, claiming she had a fun surprise for the family. She connected her phone to her Bluetooth speakers and announced she'd be sharing some heartfelt moments she'd captured. What followed was a carefully curated highlight reel of my private conversations, edited to remove context and present me in the worst possible light, me venting about David's aunt's nosy questions about when we'd have children, me expressing frustration about his cousins drinking at our anniversary party, me and David discussing our budget concerns after I'd had to take a pay cut. The family sat in stunned silence as Sandra played snippet after snippet, a small smile playing at her lips as she watched my reputation crumble in real time. David stood up halfway through, demanding she stop, but Sandra just raised her voice. Everyone should know who they've welcomed into the family, she announced. She's not the sweet girl she pretends to be. That's when everything unraveled completely. Sandra, caught up in her triumph, made a fatal miscalculation. She played the most private recording of all, me crying in our bedroom 3 months earlier, with David comforting me after we'd lost a pregnancy at 8 weeks. A loss we hadn't told anyone about, not even Sandra. I can't face telling people yet, my voice sobbed through the speaker. Especially not your mother. She'll probably say it's for the best since she thinks I'd be a terrible mother anyway. The recording continued for a few more seconds before David lunged forward and grabbed the phone, his face white with fury. He deleted the entire folder while Sandra protested, then turned to face the silent, horrified family. "We're leaving," he announced, his voice shaking, "and we won't be back. Anyone who wants a relationship with us will respect that my mother is no longer welcome in our lives." The drive home was silent, both of us processing the public humiliation and the deeper betrayal. Sandra called David's phone 27 times that night. His sister called too, along with several cousins and his father, all trying to smooth things over, suggesting we were overreacting to what Sandra had meant as a misguided joke. "She just wants what's best for the family," his father insisted. "You know how she gets carried away." David's response was clear and final, recording private conversations for months and publicly humiliating my wife isn't getting carried away. It's unhinged, and I won't subject my family to it. The next few weeks were a blur of damage control. Some relatives took Sandra's side, suggesting I must have something to hide if I was so upset about the recordings. Others were appropriately horrified, but still pushed for reconciliation, because family is family. Only David's younger sister fully supported our decision, having been the target of Sandra's controlling behavior herself years earlier. 2 months after the reunion, David was offered a job transfer to the opposite coast. We took it without hesitation, selling our house and moving 3,000 miles away within 6 weeks. We didn't tell any family members our new address, using a P.O. box for any necessary correspondence. It's been 3 years since we left. We have a 1-year-old daughter now, born safely after a tense pregnancy. Sandra has never met her and never will. David maintains minimal contact with his father and siblings via video calls, but we've built a new life surrounded by friends who've become our chosen family. Sometimes I feel guilty about the distance between David and his family, but then I remember the calculated cruelty of what his mother did, not just recording our private moments but weaponizing them, including our most painful loss, all to drive a wedge between us. There's no coming back from that kind of betrayal. The hardest lesson we learned was that sharing DNA doesn't entitle someone to be in your life. Real family respects boundaries. Real family builds you up rather than tearing you down. And sometimes real family is the one you create for yourself, far away from the toxic patterns you were born into. Revenge can be swift and unexpected, especially when your ex never sees it coming until it's too late to salvage their dreams. Daniel and I met during our second year of law school. We were assigned as partners for a mock trial, and our opposing counsel didn't stand a chance. We demolished them with our preparation and natural chemistry. Afterward, he asked me out for coffee, which turned into dinner, which turned into a 3-year relationship that I thought was heading toward forever. We graduated in the top 10% of our class, and both landed decent positions at mid-sized firms in the city. The hours were grueling, but we supported each other through the transition from students to associates. When I'd come home exhausted from document review, he'd have dinner waiting. When he was preparing for his first solo court appearance, I stayed up all night helping him rehearse his arguments. Daniel always talked about making partner at Crawford and Mitchell, one of the most prestigious litigation firms in the city. It was his dream since before law school, the pinnacle of success in his mind. He checked their job postings religiously, waiting for an opening at his experience level. When I make it to Crawford, he'd say, already speaking it into existence, we'll finally take that trip to Italy, first class all the way. I believed in his ambition. Daniel was brilliant, charismatic, and tenacious, exactly what big firms look for. So when the associate position at Crawford finally opened up, I threw myself into helping him land it. I spent an entire weekend helping him perfect his resume and cover letter. I conducted mock interviews with questions I researched from Glassdoor reviews of Crawford's hiring process. I even reached out to a former classmate who had connections there to put in a good word. My own work suffered that week, but Daniel's success felt like our success. We were a team, after all. The night after he submitted his application, we celebrated with expensive champagne. He seemed distracted, checking his phone more than usual, but I chalked it up to nervous anticipation. We made love that night, and he held me tighter than normal. In hindsight, I should have recognized it as goodbye. The next morning, I woke up to a text from him. Not a call. A text. I've been thinking about us, and I don't see a future together anymore. I've met someone else. I'm sorry to do this over text, but I think it's better if we make a clean break. I'll come by for my things when you're at work tomorrow. 3 years reduced to 5 sentences. No discussion, no warning, no respect for everything we'd built. Just a cowardly text followed by the surgical removal of his presence from my apartment and my life. I later found out through mutual friends that the someone else was Veronica, a paralegal from his firm. They'd apparently been having lunch together for months, which evolved into after-work drinks, which evolved into an affair around the time the Crawford position opened up. The betrayal knocked me sideways. I took a week off work, barely eating or sleeping, just trying to process how someone I trusted so completely could discard me so easily. My friends took shifts staying with me, forcing me to shower and eat, assuring me I'd get through this. I didn't believe them. Eventually, I dragged myself back to work, functioning on autopilot. I started therapy, joined a kickboxing class to channel my anger, and threw myself into a pro bono case to distract my mind. Slowly, painfully, I began rebuilding my life without Daniel in it. 6 months passed. I wasn't fully healed, but I was getting there. I'd made new friends through kickboxing, earned praise for my pro bono victory, and even gone on a couple of casual dates. Daniel still crossed my mind daily, but the sharp pain had dulled to an occasional ache. Then came the fateful happy hour with some law school friends. After a few drinks, Rachel mentioned that Daniel had made it to the final interview stage at Crawford and Mitchell. "He's been insufferable about it," she said, not realizing the impact of her words. "Keeps telling everyone it's basically a done deal. Apparently the hiring partner loves him." I managed to maintain my composure, asking casual questions about his progress. Rachel, who was friends with Veronica, was all too happy to share. Daniel had aced the initial interviews. He was meeting the partners for dinner next week. He'd already given notice at his current firm, so confident was he about the position. "And get this," Rachel added, lowering her voice dramatically. "He and Veronica are looking at engagement rings. She thinks he's going to propose once he gets the official offer." I smiled and nodded, excused myself to the bathroom, and had a silent scream in the stall. All the progress I'd made felt like it was unraveling. Daniel was getting everything he wanted, the dream job, the new relationship, while I was still putting myself back together. I went home that night and did something I hadn't done in months. I opened a bottle of wine and scrolled through old photos of us. That's when I remembered the screenshots. About 8 months before our breakup, Daniel had used my laptop to check some work emails while his was being repaired. He'd left himself logged into everything: email, social media, messaging apps. I wasn't snooping, I was just closing his accounts before using my computer. But a Facebook message caught my eye. Daniel sharing details about an ongoing case with a college friend who worked in journalism. The conversation was shockingly explicit. He'd shared client names, settlement amounts, and strategy details, a clear violation of attorney-client privilege and bar ethics rules. I'd taken screenshots intending to show him how dangerous this was, but got distracted and ultimately forgot about it. The screenshots were still sitting in a folder labeled Daniel Important, and here's where it gets absurd. As I stared at those screenshots, a battle began raging inside me. The ethical attorney part of my brain knew this was serious misconduct that reflected on Daniel's fitness to practice law. The heartbroken ex-girlfriend part of my brain saw a nuclear option for revenge. I closed my laptop and went to bed, determined to forget about the screenshots. I wasn't that person. I wouldn't sabotage someone's career, no matter how badly they'd hurt me. But the knowledge sat with me for days, growing heavier. I thought about Daniel strutting into Crawford and Mitchell, being handed the job I'd helped him prepare for, using it to build a life with the woman he'd cheated with. The unfairness burned. After 3 days of internal debate, I created an anonymous email account. I composed a message to Crawford's hiring partner. Professional, detached, simply stating that they should be aware of ethical concerns regarding candidate Daniel Mercer. I attached the screenshots with client information redacted, but the dates and Daniel's name clearly visible. My finger hovered over the send button for a full minute. This was crossing a line I couldn't uncross, but then I remembered the text message breakup, the way he'd calculated the timing, waiting until after I'd helped him with his resume. The casual cruelty of having me help him build a future he already knew wouldn't include me. I hit send, then immediately closed my laptop and threw up in the bathroom. For the next 2 days, I swung between regret and justification. I told myself I'd done the legal profession a favor by exposing someone who couldn't be trusted with confidential information. I told myself Daniel had made his own bed by violating ethics rules in the first place. I told myself a lot of things to quiet the voice, saying I'd done something unforgivable. Then Rachel texted me, "OMG, Daniel just got the Crawford offer rescinded. No explanation. He's having a complete meltdown." My stomach dropped. It had worked. A small dark part of me felt vindicated, but mostly I felt ill. This wasn't justice, it was vengeance, and I wasn't sure I could live with it. That weekend, I had an emergency session with my therapist where I confessed everything. She didn't judge me but helped me understand the complex emotions behind my actions. The powerlessness I'd felt when Daniel ended things. The betrayal of realizing our relationship had meant so little to him. The anger at watching him succeed despite his behavior, both personal and professional. What you did came from pain, she said gently. Understanding that doesn't excuse it, but it helps you learn from it so you don't make similar choices in the future. Over the next few months, I worked through my guilt in therapy. I never told Daniel or anyone else what I'd done. He eventually found another position, not as prestigious as Crawford, but respectable. He and Veronica got engaged. Life moved on. A year after sending that email, I anonymously donated a substantial amount to my law school to establish a small scholarship for ethics in legal practice. It felt like a small way to balance the scales, to recognize that while Daniel's ethics violation was real, my motivation for exposing it had been personal rather than professional. I'm not proud of what I did. I sometimes wonder who I might have become if I'd chosen differently. If I'd either confronted Daniel directly about the ethics violation when I first discovered it, or simply let it go entirely after our breakup. Would I be more at peace? Would he have eventually exposed himself through his own carelessness? There's no way to know. All I can do is acknowledge that pain can make us capable of things we never thought possible, both creative and destructive. In my darkest moment, I chose destruction. The consequences rippled through both our lives, visible to him but invisible to everyone else. An anonymous email, a dream derailed, a secret I'll carry forever. Some betrayals happen with strangers, others with friends, but nothing prepares you for when the other woman turns out to be someone unimaginable. I met Mark at a charity fundraiser 8 years ago. He was charming, successful, and looked at me like I was the only person in a room of 300. Within a year, we were married, a small ceremony with close friends and his large, welcoming family. My side of the aisle was noticeably emptier. I told Mark about my mother leaving when I was 13, disappearing from my life without explanation, and how my father had raised me alone until he passed away during my senior year of college. Her loss, Mark would say, kissing my forehead. Anyone who'd walk away from you doesn't deserve you. Those words became bitterly ironic later, but for 8 years we built what I thought was a solid marriage. Mark's marketing firm grew steadily, requiring frequent travel and late nights that I accepted as part of his success. I focused on my career as a physical therapist, making partner at my clinic last year. We didn't have children, a mutual decision to enjoy our freedom and careers while we were young. The first sign something was wrong came in the form of a hotel receipt I found while doing laundry. The Westbrook Hotel downtown, a room charged for a Wednesday afternoon when Mark had supposedly been at a client meeting. When I asked about it casually, his explanation came too quickly. "Oh, that was for Garrett," he said, referring to his business partner. "His condo was being fumigated, so he needed somewhere to work for a day. I put it on our card since he forgot his." It sounded plausible enough, but something in his delivery felt rehearsed. Still, I pushed the doubt away. We'd always had such a solid relationship. Surely I was being paranoid. Then came the perfume. Mark came home late one night, and when I hugged him, I caught a distinct floral scent. Not overpowering, but definitely not his usual cologne or anything from our home. When I mentioned it, he claimed he'd been in a client's office where some assistant must have been wearing too much perfume. The excuses continued piling up alongside the evidence. More hotel charges. Mysterious dinner receipts for 2 at intimate restaurants when he was supposedly working late. Phone calls that he'd step outside to take. The classic signs were all there, But I kept searching for alternative explanations because the truth was too painful to face. The breaking point came when I found a woman's earring in his car, a distinctive pearl drop that had fallen between the passenger seat and center console. When confronted, Mark claimed it must belong to his assistant, who'd borrowed his car to pick up lunch the previous week. Enough, I said that night. Either you tell me what's going on, or I'll find out myself. Mark looked me straight in the eye and swore on his mother's life that he was faithful. He suggested I was creating problems, that perhaps I needed therapy for trust issues stemming from my mother's abandonment. His deflection made me physically ill, using my deepest wound to gaslight me. The next day, I called a private investigator. Karen was a former client of mine who had recovered from a serious car accident under my care. She now ran a small PI firm specializing in infidelity cases. I felt ridiculous explaining my suspicions, but Karen was professional and non-judgmental. Unfortunately, this is familiar territory, she assured me. Let's find out what's happening so you can make informed decisions. For 2 weeks, Karen tracked Mark's movements, documenting his patterns. Her preliminary report confirmed my worst fears. Mark was indeed meeting someone regularly at the Westbrook Hotel. The mystery woman appeared to be in her 50s, well-dressed, with dark hair. Karen couldn't get clear photos of her face, as she always wore large sunglasses and seemed careful about being seen. She's experienced at this, Karen noted. The way she checks surroundings varies her arrival times. This isn't her first affair. What tormented me most was the regular nature of their meetings, every Wednesday afternoon, like clockwork. While I was helping patients rebuild their lives, my husband was systematically destroying ours. I had options. I could confront Mark with the evidence. I could file for divorce immediately. Instead, I chose the path that would haunt me forever. I decided to catch them in the act. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes to remove any possibility of denial. The following Wednesday, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I followed Mark's routine as documented by Karen. He left his office at 1:30, drove to the Westbrook, and checked in under a business name. I gave him 15 minutes, then entered the hotel wearing sunglasses and a scarf over my hair, heart pounding so hard I thought it might bruise my ribs. At the front desk, I gave a performance worthy of an Oscar. I'm so sorry, but my husband forgot his medication. He checked in about 15 minutes ago. Mark Jensen, I really need to get it to him. The young receptionist barely looked up before telling me, Room 718, clearly not paid enough to care about hotel security protocols. What happened next plays in my mind like a surreal film. The colors too vivid, the audio slightly distorted, the elevator ride that lasted an eternity. The long walk down the hallway, standing outside room 718, hearing muffled laughter through the door, using the key card I'd swiped from Mark's wallet the night before, the door swinging open, Mark in nothing but his boxers, looking up with an expression of confused horror. And there, sitting on the bed in a silk robe, was a face I hadn't seen in 15 years, but would recognize until my dying day. My mother. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood frozen in the doorway, my brain refusing to process the impossible scene before me. Mark recovered first, scrambling for words, excuses, explanations, none of which registered. I was staring at my mother, who looked barely older than when she'd walked out. Just a few more lines around her eyes, her dark hair now highlighted with expert touches of caramel. Olivia, she finally said, my name sounding foreign in her voice after so many years. This isn't... I turned and ran, down the hall, into the elevator, through the lobby. I made it to my car before vomiting in the parking lot. An elderly couple gave me a concerned look, probably assuming I was drunk in the middle of the afternoon. I wished I was. Mark called 17 times that evening. I let each one go to voicemail while I sat in our living room, our home, surrounded by photographs of our life together. 8 years of memories, all contaminated now by the most twisted betrayal imaginable. When he finally came home, I was eerily calm, packed suitcase by the door. He entered cautiously, like approaching a wild animal. "Please," he began, "let me explain. I didn't know who she was at first. We met at a conference in Chicago 6 months ago. She never mentioned having a daughter, and the last name is different." "How long," I interrupted, "did it take for you to figure out you were sleeping with my mother?" He hesitated, and I knew the answer before he spoke. "2 months," he finally admitted. "She showed me a photo of you as a teenager. I should have ended it immediately. But you didn't," I finished for him. "You continued sleeping with the woman who abandoned me, while coming home to me, looking me in the eye, making love to me, planning our future together." The audacity required for that level of deception is almost impressive in its monstrosity. It takes a special kind of broken to maintain such elaborate compartmentalization. Mark tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. "She said she wanted to reconnect with you," he offered weakly. "She was working up to it, trying to figure out how to approach you after all these years." I laughed then, a hollow sound that frightened even me. "By fucking my husband? That was her bridge to reconciliation?" I left that night, checked into a hotel across town, and called my attorney the next morning. The divorce was filed by afternoon. Mark didn't contest anything, likely fearing what would happen if the real story came out. I took half of everything, sold the house, and moved to another state within 6 weeks. My mother tried reaching out several times. She sent letters claiming she'd been unaware of who Mark was when they first met, that discovering I was his wife had been a complicated shock. She insisted she'd been working toward revealing herself to me, rebuilding our relationship. The final straw came when she sent a package containing old family photos and a handwritten letter detailing her version of events. Among the contents was a photo I recognized from my wedding day, Mark and me cutting our cake, my face alight with happiness. The photo was slightly wrinkled, as if frequently handled. She'd known exactly who he was from the beginning. She'd sought him out deliberately, perhaps spotting him in social media posts or local business news. What her endgame was, I'll never know. Reconciliation? Revenge for some perceived slight from when I was a child? Or simply the thrill of taking something that belonged to the daughter she'd discarded? I've spent 2 years rebuilding my life in Denver. New career, new friends, even a cautious new relationship with someone who knows my full story and understands why trust comes so difficultly to me now. I've had extensive therapy to process the unique trauma of what happened. Some people ask if I'll ever forgive either of them. The question always strikes me as strange, as if forgiveness is the expected end to every story. Some betrayals cut too deep for conventional healing. Some actions reveal such fundamental flaws in a person's character that rebuilding any kind of relationship would be both foolish and self-destructive. What I've learned is that family isn't defined by blood or marriage vows. Those can be the weakest bonds when tested by selfishness or desire. True family is built on respect, consistency, and the active choice to protect rather than harm. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is recognize when someone is poison to your life, regardless of their title or history. I don't hate my mother or Mark anymore. Hatred requires energy I'm no longer willing to give them, but I will never allow either of them back into my life. Some doors, once closed, should remain locked forever. When money and relationships mix, even the closest bonds can be corrupted, as one parent discovered in the most heartbreaking way. My wife Margaret passed away from cancer 5 years ago. We'd been married for 32 years, high school sweethearts who built a life together, a successful financial consulting business, and raised our only son, Alex. Her death left a hole in our lives that nothing could fill, but Alex and I leaned on each other to get through it. At least, that's what I thought we were doing. Margaret had always been the more demonstrative parent. I was the provider, the planner, the one who taught Alex about investments and responsibility, while Margaret handled the emotional side of parenting. When she died, I worried that Alex and I would drift apart without her as our bridge, but instead our relationship seemed to strengthen through our shared grief. He'd call regularly from his apartment downtown, come over for weekly dinners, and genuinely seemed interested in my well-being. At 63, I wasn't exactly elderly, but Margaret's death had affected my health. I developed high blood pressure and needed daily medication. Alex seemed appropriately concerned, checking that I was taking my pills and keeping my doctor appointments. His attention felt like love, not intrusion. Everything changed when he started dating Vanessa. He brought her to dinner about 6 months after they'd started dating. She was beautiful in that polished way that suggests considerable effort. Perfect makeup, not a hair out of place. Designer clothes that were just flashy enough to make sure you noticed them. She was 28 to Alex's 31, worked in luxury real estate consulting, whatever that meant, and had a laugh that set my teeth on edge. Practiced, theatrical, always perfectly timed after Alex spoke. But I was determined to like her because Alex seemed smitten. Throughout dinner, I noticed how she steered the conversation toward specific topics. Our house. Such a beautiful historic property. It must be worth a fortune now. My business. Alex mentioned you're thinking of retiring soon. And, most tellingly, my health. Alex mentioned your heart condition, she said, her face a mask of concern. My grandfather had the same issue. It's so important to have everything in order. You know, legally speaking, just in case. My instincts flared, but I dismissed them. Was I just being an overprotective father? Was I looking for reasons to dislike the woman replacing me as Alex's primary relationship? I decided to reserve judgment and simply observe. Over the next few months, Vanessa became a fixture at my home. She ingratiated herself by bringing elaborate meals, organizing my kitchen cabinets without asking, and constantly mentioning how much I reminded her of her own father, who passed too soon without proper estate planning. The questions became more pointed. Had I updated my will since Margaret died? Did I have a living trust? Had I considered putting the house in Alex's name to avoid estate taxes? Each time I'd give vague answers while watching her reaction. I should put you in touch with my friend who specializes in estate planning for high net worth individuals, she suggested one evening. He helped my last boyfriend's father save thousands by transferring assets early. Her last boyfriend's father, something about the phrasing bothered me. It implied a pattern, a specific interest in not just the men she dated but their families, particularly their finances. That night after they left, I did something I never thought I'd do. I started investigating my son's girlfriend. I hired a private investigator, explaining my concerns as delicately as possible. I'm probably being paranoid, I told him, but something doesn't feel right. 2 weeks later, the PI delivered his report, and my stomach dropped. Vanessa Roberts had been in 4 serious relationships over the past 8 years, all with sons of wealthy men. In each case, she'd shown an unusual interest in the family's financial affairs. In 3 of those relationships, significant assets had been transferred either to the son or jointly to the son and Vanessa, shortly before the relationships mysteriously ended. Even more disturbing, her most recent ex's father had died of a sudden heart attack just weeks after changing his will to favor his son, and by extension, Vanessa. No foul play had been suspected, but given the pattern, I decided to play along with their scheme, pretending to consider their suggestions while watching more carefully. I told them I was meeting with estate lawyers to get my affairs in order, and Vanessa's interest intensified. She began bringing articles about estate planning, suggesting specific arrangements that would give Alex immediate control over my assets. But that wasn't even the worst part. About a month into this charade, I returned home to find signs of a break-in. Nothing valuable was taken, just some paperwork from my home office and, strangely, my medicine cabinet had been thoroughly searched. My blood pressure medication bottle was there, but something seemed off about it. I took the pills to my pharmacist friend for testing and installed a comprehensive security system in my home, including cameras in common areas. I didn't tell Alex or Vanessa about either action. The pharmacist confirmed my suspicions. My medication had been tampered with, some pills replaced with a much higher dose that could cause dangerous drops in blood pressure or even heart failure in combination with alcohol. The security cameras revealed the final, devastating truth. While I was at a doctor's appointment, Alex and Vanessa came to my house. The footage showed them in my living room, discussing their progress. "Dad seems on board with the transfer," Alex said. "Once the house is in my name, we can move forward with the other accounts." Vanessa's response chilled me to the bone. "What if he changes his mind? Your dad's not stupid, Alex. He's been asking questions." "He won't," Alex assured her. "And even if he gets suspicious, the adjustment to his medication should kick in soon." Just a little health scare to remind him of his mortality. They laughed together, casually discussing my potential accelerated decline, as Vanessa called it. My son, the boy I'd raised, the young man I'd sacrificed for, was not just complicit in this scheme, but an active participant. That's when everything unraveled completely. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My own son, plotting what amounted to my slow murder for financial gain. The son who'd held my hand at his mother's funeral. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike, to drive a car, to be a man of integrity like his mother had wanted. I contacted my lawyer immediately and made 3 critical changes. I updated my will to exclude Alex entirely. I established a foundation in Margaret's name that would receive the bulk of my estate, and I prepared a legal case with all the evidence I'd gathered. Then I invited them both to dinner, with my lawyer arriving for dessert. When she showed up, briefcase in hand, Vanessa's perfectly maintained composure cracked slightly. "Alex and Vanessa," I began, once we were all seated in the living room. "I've been considering your advice about my estate planning." They exchanged a quick glance that spoke volumes. "I've decided to make some changes," I continued, nodding to my lawyer, who opened her briefcase. I played the security footage on my television. Watching their faces as they heard their own voices discussing my demise was almost worth the heartbreak. Almost. "Dad, I can explain," Alex started, but I held up my hand. "The medication you tampered with has been tested and documented by the lab," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "The footage has been shared with my lawyer and placed in secure storage. I've filed a police report about the break-in and the medication tampering." Vanessa's transformation was remarkable. The sweet, caring facade evaporated, replaced by cold calculation. "You can't prove anything," she said. "That footage could be interpreted many ways." "Perhaps," my lawyer interjected, "but Mr. Harrington has made some decisions you should be aware of." She handed them each a document, a summary of my new estate plan that left everything to Margaret's foundation, with specific language explaining that Alex's actions had prompted the change. "I'm also prepared to seek a restraining order," I added, "and if anything happens to me, anything at all, these documents and videos go directly to the district attorney. The look on Alex's face will haunt me forever. Not remorse, at least not initially, just shock that his plan had failed, that he'd been caught." It was the face of a stranger wearing my son's features. Vanessa left immediately, already distancing herself from the failed con. Alex stayed, cycling through anger, denial, and finally, when he realized the evidence was irrefutable, a breakdown that seemed genuine. "She convinced me you were declining mentally," he sobbed. "Said we needed to protect the assets before you made bad decisions. It started as protection and became this. I never would have hurt you, Dad, I swear. But he had hurt me in ways that physical harm could never match. I asked him to leave and not contact me until I was ready. It took 2 years before I answered one of his calls. The rebuilding process has been slow and painful. Alex and Vanessa broke up immediately after that night, and he's been in therapy since then. He sent letters explaining how Vanessa systematically isolated him, convinced him I was becoming senile, and played on his fears of losing his remaining parent. I want to believe him. Some days I almost do. We meet for coffee now, once a month. Neutral ground, public places. He's working for a non-profit now. A significant step down from his previous corporate job, but perhaps a sign of genuine change. I've amended my will again, creating a trust that gives him limited access to his inheritance based on certain conditions, including continued therapy and sobriety from the gambling habit he developed with Vanessa. Trust is like a mirror. Once broken, you can glue it back together, but you'll always see the cracks. I don't know if Alex and I will ever fully repair what was shattered, but we're trying. Some days that feels like enough. As for Vanessa, I occasionally hear she's dating the son of a retired tech executive in Arizona. I considered warning them, but realized they'd likely dismiss me as a bitter old man. Sometimes people have to discover certain truths on their own, however painful the lesson might be. Neighborhood dramas usually stay contained, but sometimes one revelation can cause an entire community to implode. Oakwood Terrace was everything you'd expect from an upper-middle-class suburban paradise. 12 houses arranged in a perfect cul-de-sac, each one meticulously maintained with the kind of landscaping that requires professional help. We had monthly block parties, a Christmas cookie exchange, and a neighborhood watch so vigilant that a stray cat couldn't wander through without someone posting about it in our community group chat. My husband Jason and I moved in 3 years ago and were immediately swept into the fold of this picture-perfect community. We were the youngest couple on the street, mid-30s, no kids yet, both working in tech. Our neighbors consisted mostly of couples in their 40s with school-aged children, a few empty nesters, and one retired couple who'd been there since the neighborhood was built. The unofficial leaders of our little society were Tom and Diane Miller across the street. He was a surgeon, she ran a successful interior design business, and Sarah and Greg Thompson next door. She was our HOA president. He was some kind of financial consultant who traveled frequently. They welcomed us warmly, invited us to every gathering, and generally made us feel like part of their curated community. "We're like family here," Sarah told me during our first week, bringing over a homemade lasagna. "We look out for each other." I had no idea just how literally some of them were looking out for each other until about 6 months ago. It started innocently enough. I was up late working on a project deadline, positioned at my home office desk that faces our side window. Around 11 p.m., movement next door caught my eye. Sarah's kitchen light had flipped on. With Greg away on one of his frequent business trips, I assumed she was just grabbing a late-night snack. But then I saw a second figure enter her kitchen. It was Tom from across the street, and he definitely wasn't there to borrow sugar. I watched in shock as Tom pulled Sarah into an embrace, kissing her with the comfortable familiarity of longtime lovers. This wasn't a first-time thing. This was an established affair happening right in front of me. I quickly looked away, feeling like an accidental voyeur, and tried to refocus on my work. It wasn't my business. People have complicated marriages. Maybe Greg and Diane knew. Maybe it was one of those arrangements you hear about. I didn't mention it to Jason or anyone else. I avoided both Tom and Sarah at the next neighborhood barbecue, feeling awkward around them with this knowledge. I might have just filed it away permanently if I hadn't noticed something else strange a few weeks later. While walking our dog at dawn, I spotted Tom's distinctive silver Audi pulling out of Melissa and Patrick's driveway, the young couple at the end of the cul-de-sac. Patrick traveled for work too, and it was definitely one of his away weeks. Again, I told myself it wasn't my business. Maybe Tom was just dropping something off early. Maybe Melissa had car trouble. But then it happened again, and again with different houses. Tom leaving Jennifer and Robert's place at midnight. Tom's car parked in front of Elizabeth and David's house, while David was at a conference. Always when husbands were away, always at odd hours. My curiosity morphed into a strange obsession. I started keeping track in a note on my phone: dates, times, which houses Tom visited. I wasn't planning to do anything with this information. I was just fascinated by this alternate reality existing beneath our neighborhood's perfect veneer. That's when everything unraveled. One evening, I was taking out the trash when I noticed Sarah slipping into Michael's house. Michael, whose wife Lauren was visiting her sister with their kids. The next day, I saw Michael leaving Diane's house. Yes, Diane, Tom's wife, while Tom was at the hospital for his shift. This wasn't just a single affair. This was a web of connections, a secret network operating right under everyone's noses. My amateur surveillance expanded, and over the next month, I pieced together what appeared to be a neighborhood swinging arrangement involving at least 5 couples. Tom and Diane Miller, Sarah and Greg Thompson, though I never saw Greg participate, always away on business, Jennifer and Robert Castillo, Melissa and Patrick Winters, Elizabeth and David Chen. The only consistent pattern was that certain spouses seemed unaware. Greg, Sarah's husband, Patrick, Melissa's husband, and Lauren, Michael's wife, never appeared in any of my observations. They were frequently traveling or working late, while their partners participated in this suburban musical beds. And here's where it gets absurd. I became so engrossed in documenting this secret society that I started making excuses to be home more, adjusting my dog walking schedule, even setting up my home security cameras at strategic angles. Jason thought I was just being safety conscious when I insisted on upgrading our doorbell camera to one with a wider field of view. "What are you really working on?" he finally asked one night, finding me at the window with my phone's camera zoomed in on Tom leaving Elizabeth's house. "You've been distracted for weeks." I broke down and told him everything. To his credit, Jason didn't immediately think I was losing my mind. He was shocked, of course, but more concerned about my growing fixation than the neighborhood sex ring. "This isn't our business, Kate," he said gently. "Whatever they're doing, some of them probably have agreements. The others, well, that's between them." He was right, of course. The rational part of me knew I should drop it, focus on my own marriage, my own life. But something kept nagging at me. The unaware spouses, Greg, Patrick, Lauren, being made fools of while everyone else knew what was happening. It felt cruel, especially at our neighborhood functions where they'd chat obliviously with their spouses' lovers. The breaking point came during our summer block party. I watched Greg bring Sarah a drink, kissing her cheek affectionately, completely unaware that she'd been with Tom in his own bed just 2 nights before. I saw Patrick proudly introducing Melissa to his new colleagues, while she exchanged knowing glances with Michael across the yard. It was like watching a performance where only half the actors knew the real script. That night, in a moment of moral righteousness fueled by 3 glasses of wine, I made a decision I still question. I created an anonymous email account and drafted a detailed letter. Dates, times, connections, patterns I'd observed over 3 months. I printed 12 copies, one for each house in the cul-de-sac, and delivered them under cover of darkness like some deranged suburban vigilante. The letter began, "While some of you already know this information, others deserve to know what happens when they're away. The following residents of Oakwood Terrace have been observed engaging in extramarital affairs with their neighbors." What followed was my meticulously documented evidence, laid out in clinical detail. Names, dates, times, patterns. No editorializing, no judgment. Just information that shattered the carefully maintained illusion of our perfect little community. The aftermath was both swift and devastating. The first sign was Greg Thompson's car screeching out of his driveway at 6 a.m. the next morning, suitcases hastily thrown in the back. By the end of the week, Patrick Winters had moved into an apartment downtown. Lauren had taken her children to her sister's permanently. 3 separate divorce filings hit the county courthouse within days. Our neighborhood WhatsApp group exploded with accusations, denials, and eventually the identification of the various factions. Some defended the arrangement, consenting adults, don't judge what you don't understand. Others expressed disgust and betrayal. The monthly block party was officially cancelled until further notice. The Christmas Cookie Exchange Committee disbanded. Within a month, for sale signs appeared in front of the Thompson and Winters homes. The Millers stayed, but Diane lived alone now. Tom had moved in with Jennifer after her husband Robert left. The Chens stopped acknowledging any neighbours, building a taller fence around their property. Jason and I became unintended neutral parties, invited to neither the defensive gatherings of the swingers who remained, nor the moral outrage coffee meetings of those who'd been betrayed. We existed in a suburban limbo, greeting everyone with awkward waves but never stopping to chat like before. I never admitted to sending the letter, not even when Sarah confronted me directly, her eyes red from crying or rage, I couldn't tell which. "Was it you?" she demanded on my doorstep. "You were always watching, always at your window." "I don't know what you're talking about," I lied, my heart pounding. "But I got the letter too." She didn't believe me, but she couldn't prove anything either. She moved out 2 weeks later. The guilt I feel isn't about exposing adults who made their choices. It's about the collateral damage. The children who were uprooted from their homes and schools, suddenly shuttled between apartments for weekend visitations. The unwitting spouses whose entire lives imploded in a single morning. The community that, for all its superficial perfection, had provided a sense of belonging and safety that vanished overnight. Jason and I are still here, now the second longest residents on the street after the elderly couple who've witnessed multiple generations of neighborhood drama. New families have moved in, unaware of the scandal that fractured this place. We smile and welcome them, help them bring in groceries, invite them for drinks. Nobody talks about what happened. It's become Oakwood Terrace's unspoken history. Sometimes I see Tom at the grocery store with Jennifer, or past Diane walking her dog. We nod politely, ghosts of a community that no longer exists. I still wonder if I did the right thing. Did the betrayed spouses deserve to know, or would ignorance truly have been bliss? Was exposing the truth worth destroying the elaborate fiction so many had committed to maintaining? I don't have those answers. All I know is that perfect suburban facades often hide complicated realities, and sometimes when you pull at a loose thread, the entire tapestry unravels in ways you never anticipated. Identity theft is devastating enough, but discovering your own twin is behind it takes betrayal to another level. Everyone says that twins share a special bond, but Jake and I took it to another level growing up. We weren't just brothers. We were best friends, co-conspirators, and each other's built-in defense attorneys whenever one of us got in trouble. Our parents would joke that we had our own secret language before we could even speak properly. Being identical twins gave us an edge. We'd switch classes in school when one of us hadn't studied for a test, or take turns going to after-school detention. It was harmless fun, the kind of twin hijinks everyone expects. Everything changed when our parents divorced during our freshman year of high school. The split was messy and bitter, with Jake and I caught in the middle. Somehow the court decided that splitting us up was the best solution. I stayed with our mum in Chicago, while Jake moved to Seattle with our dad. It was like losing a limb. We promised to stay in touch, to visit during holidays, to never lose our connection. Those promises lasted about 2 years. Jake gradually became more distant, his calls less frequent. When I reached out, he'd be short or make excuses to end the conversation. Dad apparently remarried quickly, and according to Mum, his new wife wasn't interested in maintaining connections to his previous life. By the time we turned 18, Jake and I were essentially strangers who happened to share identical DNA. I moved on with my life, went to college, graduated with a business degree, got a decent job at a marketing firm in Chicago, and built a solid life for myself. I occasionally checked Jake's social media, but his updates were rare and revealed little. From what I could gather, he hadn't gone to college and seemed to bounce between jobs in the Seattle area. I sent birthday messages each year that received brief acknowledgements, if any response at all. After a decade of this, I'd essentially accepted that my twin was no longer part of my life. Then the strange occurrences began. It started with a woman approaching me at a coffee shop near my apartment. "Alex, I've been texting you all week. Why haven't you responded?" When I explained that I wasn't who she thought I was, she looked at me like I was crazy. "We literally had dinner 3 nights ago. Are you serious right now?" I chalked it up to a bizarre case of mistaken identity and forgot about it. But similar incidents kept happening. People I'd never met greeting me by name, mentioning conversations we'd never had, places we'd supposedly been together. One particularly angry guy cornered me outside my office building, demanding the $500 I supposedly borrowed from him. Then came the financial mysteries. Credit card bills for accounts I'd never opened, overdraft notices from banks I didn't use, collection calls for loans I'd never taken out. My credit score, which I'd carefully maintained since college, plummeted without explanation. I spent hours on the phone with credit bureaus, filing fraud reports, trying to unravel what was happening. I was convinced I was the victim of some sophisticated identity theft ring. I changed all my passwords, froze my credit, and began documenting every strange encounter. The credit bureaus took forever to investigate, and the police seemed uninterested in what they viewed as minor financial fraud. And then came the breaking point. I was driving home from work one evening when police lights flashed behind me. A routine traffic stop. I assumed maybe a broken taillight. Instead, I was ordered out of my car at gunpoint, handcuffed, and informed I was being arrested for multiple DUIs and failure to appear in court. I spent a terrifying night in jail, completely confused and increasingly desperate as I tried to explain that I didn't even have any traffic tickets, let alone DUIs. It took my mother posting bail and a lawyer demanding the police compare my fingerprints to those of the person who'd been in court before I was finally released. That's when everything unraveled. The arrest photos from the DUI cases showed someone identical to me, but with a small scar on his left eyebrow that I didn't have. Jake had gotten that scar when we were 12 after falling out of a treehouse. It was Jake in those mugshots, using my name when he was arrested. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My own twin brother had moved to my city and was systematically using our identical appearance to create a double life, one where he got all the benefits and I got all the consequences. The collection notices, the angry creditors, the confused dates, all of it made sickening sense now. With the help of my lawyer and a private investigator, we pieced together the full scope of what Jake had been doing. He'd moved to Chicago about 8 months earlier, somehow obtained a copy of my driver's license, and begun establishing a parallel life using my identity. He'd opened credit cards and taken out loans using my excellent credit history. He'd even been dating multiple women around the city, all of whom thought they were dating me. He'd gotten the DUIs while claiming to be me, then skipped the court dates, leaving me to deal with the consequences. The investigator discovered Jake was renting an apartment just 20 minutes from mine, hiding in plain sight in a city of nearly 3 million people. Things went from bad to unhinged when my bank called to verify that I wanted to wire the proceeds from my home sale to an offshore account. My home sale? I wasn't selling my condo. Jake had somehow created forged documents and listed my property for sale, already accepting an offer and scheduling a closing. That was the final straw. Despite pressure from my mother to handle this as a family matter, her words, not mine, I pressed formal charges. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged signatures, witness testimonies, security camera footage showing Jake using my ID, and the paper trail of financial fraud. The detective assigned to my case called it the most bizarre identity theft scheme he'd ever encountered, facilitated by the perfect genetic disguise of being my identical twin. Jake was arrested while meeting with the title company to complete the fraudulent sale of my condo. The look on his face when officers handcuffed him Confusion, as if he couldn't understand why there would be consequences for his actions, still haunts me. He truly seemed to believe he was entitled to my life simply because we shared the same face. The weeks that followed were a nightmare of legal proceedings, credit disputes, and painful family conversations. My mother initially begged me to drop the charges, insisting that Jake needed help, not punishment. I reminded her that he hadn't just stolen my identity, he'd systematically tried to destroy my life while building his own using my reputation and credit. You don't understand what his life has been like, she argued during one particularly heated call. Your father and his wife treated him terribly. He's been struggling for years. And that justifies stealing my identity, nearly getting me sent to prison, trying to sell my house. I fired back. His struggles don't give him the right to ruin my life. The family divide deepened, with relatives taking sides. Most supported me, recognizing the severity of Jake's actions, but a vocal minority insisted I was being vindictive rather than seeking justice. The truth was more complicated. I was angry, yes, but also devastated. The brother I'd once been inseparable from had become someone who saw me not as family, but as a resource to be exploited. Jake eventually accepted a plea deal, 18 months in prison plus 5 years of probation, with mandatory psychiatric treatment and full financial restitution. During his sentencing, he finally spoke directly to me for the first time. I never meant to hurt you, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. It started small, just using your name to get a credit card when mine was maxed out. Then it got easier each time. I told myself you wouldn't miss what I was taking, that you had so much and I had nothing. I'm sorry. His apology felt hollow, especially given the calculated nature of his actions. This wasn't a single moment of weakness. It was months of deliberate choices to steal, not just my money, but my entire identity. Still, as I watched my own face, my mirror image, being led away in handcuffs, I felt an unexpected pang of grief for the brother I'd lost long before his crimes began. 14 months into his sentence, Jake sent a letter through our mother asking if I would be willing to see him. Against my lawyer's advice, I agreed to a monitored visit at the prison. The conversation was awkward, stilted, but seemed sincere. Jake had been in therapy, taking medication for previously undiagnosed bipolar disorder, and working through the resentment and entitlement that had fueled his actions. After his release 4 months later, we began the slow, uncomfortable process of rebuilding some version of a relationship, meeting monthly with a family therapist who specializes in estrangement and betrayal. Jake is living in a halfway house, working a retail job, and making small but consistent restitution payments. He's also legally changed his name to Jacob, rather than Jake, a small but symbolic step toward establishing his own identity separate from mine. Trust is returning in microscopic increments. I still check my credit report weekly. I still feel a jolt of anxiety when my phone rings with an unknown number, but I'm also cautiously hopeful that the brother I once knew isn't completely lost. The therapist reminds us that reconciliation doesn't mean forgetting or even fully forgiving. It means finding a new way forward that acknowledges the past while not being defined by it. As identical twins, Jake and I will always share the same face, but we're learning the hard way that sharing DNA doesn't entitle you to share someone else's life, and that true family is built on respect and boundaries, not just genetic code. Weddings bring out the best in some friends and the absolute worst in others, as one bride discovered just days before her ceremony. I've always been the type of bride who laughs at those Bridezilla reality shows. When I got engaged to Ben last year, I promised myself I'd stay grounded throughout the wedding planning process. For the most part, I did, handling vendor mishaps with grace and compromising on details without meltdowns. After all, what mattered most was marrying the love of my life, not whether the napkins perfectly matched the bridesmaid's shoes. My best friend Rachel was by my side through everything. We'd been inseparable since third grade when she defended me against playground bullies. 20 years of friendship had given us a bond I never questioned. She was the obvious choice for maid of honor, and she seemed genuinely thrilled for me. She helped address invitations, joined me for every dress fitting, and organized the most thoughtful bridal shower. 3 weeks before the wedding, though, strange things started happening. Small things at first, a vendor calling to confirm a cancellation I never made, my carefully selected place cards arriving with spelling errors despite triple-checking the file I sent. I chalked it up to typical wedding chaos and the universe testing my cool bride resolve. Then came the missing deposits. The cake bakery called saying they'd refunded my deposit as requested and were sorry to hear we'd chosen another vendor. The florist had a similar story. In both cases, someone claiming to be me had called to cancel. I spent hours on the phone sorting out these mishaps, reinstating orders, and sending new deposits. Wedding planning is breaking me, I confessed to Ben over takeout one night. I'm starting to feel paranoid, like someone's deliberately sabotaging our wedding. Ben suggested I was just stressed, but the coincidences kept piling up. When our personalized invitations arrived with Ben's name misspelled, a detail Rachel had helped proofread twice, I finally shared my concerns with our wedding coordinator, Megan. Unlike Ben, Megan didn't dismiss my suspicions. I've seen this before, she said carefully. Sometimes jealousy makes people do strange things. Is there anyone close to you who might resent your happiness? I immediately defended Rachel, explaining our long history, but Megan's question lingered in my mind. Had Rachel seemed different lately? Perhaps quieter when Ben was around? I recalled how she'd hardly contributed to conversations during our dinner double dates, yet became animated as soon as he left the room. Little moments that seemed insignificant individually began forming a disturbing pattern. Just to rule it out, Megan suggested, maybe we should take some precautions with your dress. It's the one thing most brides would truly break over. My dress was currently hanging in our spare bedroom, which had become the designated wedding storage room. With some reluctance, I agreed to Megan's suggestion to install a small security camera facing the closet where the dress hung. It felt ridiculous, spying in my own home, suspecting my best friend, but Megan insisted it was just for peace of mind. For 5 days, nothing happened. I started believing I truly was being paranoid, letting wedding stress color my judgment. Then, the night after our final pre-wedding dinner, when Rachel stayed over because she'd had too much wine to drive home, the camera captured footage I'll never forget. At 2:13 a.m., the spare room door opened. Rachel entered fully dressed despite supposedly going to bed hours earlier. She moved directly to the closet, removing my wedding dress with careful precision. For a moment, she just stared at it, running her hands over the delicate beadwork I'd fallen in love with. Then she reached into her pocket and removed a small pair of scissors. What came next still makes my stomach turn. With methodical precision, Rachel began cutting tiny holes along the seams, places that wouldn't be immediately visible, but would catastrophically tear when worn. After that, she produced a small bottle of red wine and deliberately poured it down the bodice, watching it spread across the ivory fabric. Her expression remained eerily calm throughout, almost detached as she destroyed what she knew was irreplaceable to me. When finished, she carefully hung the dress back exactly as she'd found it, positioning it so the damage wasn't visible from the front. The entire sabotage took less than 15 minutes. I sat in stunned silence as Megan replayed the footage for me the next morning after Rachel had left for early breakfast with her mum. My brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. This wasn't just wedding sabotage. This was a calculated betrayal by someone I trusted implicitly. That's when everything unraveled. Looking back through wedding planning emails, I found that several crucial communications had been forwarded to an email address, one letter different from mine, an address I later confirmed belonged to Rachel. She'd been intercepting vendor emails for months, slowly derailing plans while maintaining her supportive facade. I was shaking with a mixture of rage and heartbreak when I texted Rachel to come over immediately. When she arrived, all smiles and wedding chatter, I silently played the footage on my laptop. The transformation in her face was like watching a mask crack. First came shock, not at what she'd done, but at being caught. Then defensive anger, followed by crumbling defeat when she realized denial was impossible. Why? I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. 20 years of friendship, and you do this to me. Through tears that I couldn't tell were genuine or manipulative, Rachel's confession spilled out. She'd been in love with Ben since I first introduced them 3 years ago. She'd been waiting for us to break up, convinced we weren't right for each other, certain that Ben would eventually see they were meant to be together instead. I wasn't trying to ruin your life, she insisted. Just create enough stress that you'd postpone the wedding. Give Ben time to realize his mistake. By destroying my dress? By sabotaging everything I've worked for? I never meant for it to go this far, she claimed, though the video evidence suggested otherwise. It just escalated. Every time you solved a problem I created, I got more desperate. The confession was almost worse than the betrayal itself. For 3 years, while helping me plan dates, listening to me gush about Ben, celebrating our engagement, she'd been secretly hoping for our relationship to fail. Every supportive moment had been a lie. I asked her to leave and never contact me again. She begged for forgiveness, insisted she'd get therapy, that she'd make it up to me somehow. But some betrayals can't be undone. I blocked her number before she reached her car. The next 24 hours were a whirlwind. Megan, bless her, activated her wedding emergency network. A boutique owner opened her shop at midnight for an emergency fitting. My bridesmaids rallied to check and reconfirm every wedding detail Rachel had touched. My sister flew in early to help manage the chaos. On my wedding day, I walked down the aisle in a different dress than I'd planned, but with a clearer understanding of loyalty and friendship. The ceremony was perfect, not because everything went according to plan, but because I was marrying someone who truly loved me, surrounded by people who genuinely wanted our happiness. Rachel didn't attempt to crash the wedding, though I'd hired security just in case. I later heard through mutual friends that she'd moved to another state, claiming the relocation was for a job opportunity rather than the social exile she was experiencing as news of her actions spread through our friend group. It's been 2 years since then. Ben and I are happy, expecting our first child this fall. I've developed new friendships, more carefully this time, but I still sometimes wake up wondering how someone could share 20 years of my life while harboring such destructive jealousy. How many moments that I treasured were genuine, and how many were part of her deception? The dress was replaceable. The vendors were rebookable. What remains irreplaceable is the unconditional trust I once gave so freely. That was the real casualty of Rachel's betrayal. Not just our friendship, but a piece of myself that could believe in people without reservation. I'm learning to trust again, but with wisdom that came at too high a price. Some workplace rivalries escalate beyond office politics into all-out war, with consequences no one can predict. I was so excited when I landed the job at Hamilton Financial Partners right after finishing my MBA. It was everything I'd worked for, a prestigious firm, competitive salary, and the chance to build a real career in wealth management. During my first week, Mark Davies, one of the senior advisors, stopped by my cubicle and invited me to lunch. I like to get to know all the new talent, he said with that charismatic smile that would later haunt my nightmares. Hamilton can be a tough place to navigate at first. Let me show you the ropes. Mark was everything a mentor should be, patient, knowledgeable, and generous with his time. He introduced me to key clients, shared insider tips on how to get on the best projects, and even invited me to industry events as his plus one. For nearly 2 years, I flourished under his guidance. My client portfolio grew steadily, my performance reviews were stellar, and I was being mentioned as a rising star in the company. You remind me of myself when I started, Mark would say, clapping me on the shoulder. "You're going places in this firm." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He'd never given me a reason to doubt his sincerity. That changed during the Blackwell account presentation. The Blackwells were a high net worth family looking to transition their considerable assets to a new financial advisor. I'd spent weeks preparing a comprehensive investment strategy tailored specifically to their needs and risk tolerance. The morning of the presentation, I discovered critical sections of my proposal were missing. Numbers were inexplicably altered, and the risk assessment completely contradicted what the clients had requested. "I don't understand," I told my direct supervisor, sweating through my suit as I frantically tried to fix the document. "I triple-checked this last night before I left." The meeting was a disaster. The Blackwells were visibly unimpressed with the sloppy presentation, and despite my attempts to explain that something had happened to my files, they signed with a competitor the following week. My boss, Diana, called me into her office afterward. "Everyone makes mistakes," she said, her disappointment evident. "But this was a multi-million-dollar account. I expected better from you." I was mortified, but determined to prove it was an anomaly, except it wasn't. Over the next 3 months, similar incidents kept happening. Client communications contained incorrect information despite my careful drafting. Spreadsheet formulas mysteriously changed overnight. Appointments were cancelled without my knowledge. My carefully built reputation began crumbling around me. Mark remained supportive throughout, at least outwardly. "This rough patch will pass," he assured me. "Everyone goes through it. Just keep your head down and power through." But behind his encouragement, I noticed subtle changes. He began taking over clients who were growing dissatisfied with my apparently careless work. He started mentioning my struggles in team meetings, always framed as concern. And most telling, he began positioning himself as the savior cleaning up my messes. The breaking point came when Diana called me in for my quarterly review and placed me on probation. "Your performance has become erratic and unreliable," she said, sliding a formal warning across her desk. "If things don't improve in the next 30 days, we'll have to reconsider your position here." I protested, trying to explain that something strange was happening, that I suspected sabotage, but even to my own ears it sounded paranoid and desperate. Who would believe that a respected senior advisor was deliberately tanking a junior colleague's career? That night, I stayed late at the office, watching as the last few employees trickled out. Mark waved goodbye around 7 p.m., mentioning he was meeting clients for dinner. Once the floor was empty, I made a decision that could either save my career or end it permanently. I installed keystroke logging software on my computer, technically against company policy, but I was desperate for evidence. The next morning, I arrived an hour early and checked the logs. My blood ran cold as I reviewed the activity from 9:47 p.m. the previous night. Someone had logged into my computer using my credentials, accessed multiple client files, altered data in my presentations, and even sent emails from my account to clients rescheduling meetings I'd never intended to move. The username showed as mine, but the keystroke patterns were distinctly different from how I typed. Shorter pauses between words, different common errors. And there was only one person with access to my login information, Mark. He'd insisted I share my passwords months ago, in case of emergency while you're on vacation. I dug deeper, reviewing security camera footage I'd requested from IT under the pretense of tracking down a missing file. There he was, Mark returning to the office at 9:30 p.m., heading directly to my desk and spending nearly an hour on my computer. The realization that someone I trusted had been systematically destroying my career was devastating, but I needed more than just one night's evidence before making accusations against a senior employee. Over the next week, I documented everything, each instance of tampering, every manipulated file, all the emergencies that conveniently position Mark as the solution. Then I discovered something even more sinister. While reviewing some of Mark's corrections to my work, I noticed a pattern in the financial projections he modified. He consistently adjusted client account projections downward by small amounts, usually less than 0.5%. Nothing clients would likely notice, but enough that over time and across multiple accounts, significant money was being diverted. That's when everything unraveled. I requested historical data from IT for the previous 4 junior advisors who had worked with Mark. All 4 had experienced similar performance issues after initial success. All 4 had eventually resigned or been terminated, and in each case, Mark had absorbed their client bases afterward. But the embezzlement was the key. I traced the pattern back through years of financial reports, finding hundreds of tiny adjustments that collectively added up to over $650,000 missing from client accounts. When questions occasionally arose about discrepancies, Mark had always managed to blame calculation errors by his protégés. Armed with overwhelming evidence, I bypassed Diana and went straight to the company president and head of security. I laid out everything: the sabotage, the pattern of destroyed careers, and most importantly, the systematic theft from client accounts. The investigation was swift and comprehensive. Mark was placed on immediate leave while forensic accountants verified my findings. Within 2 weeks, the full scope of his scheme became clear. He had been running this con for nearly a decade, deliberately mentoring promising new hires only to destroy their careers and steal from the accounts he inherited. Mark was fired and escorted from the building by security. The firm pressed charges for fraud and embezzlement, resulting in multiple felony counts. Last I heard, he accepted a plea deal for 18 months in federal prison plus restitution. As for me, Hamilton Financial made things right. I received a formal apology from the management team, a significant compensation package for the damage to my reputation, and perhaps most satisfyingly, a promotion to Mark's former position. The firm also implemented new security protocols to prevent similar situations in the future. The whole experience taught me valuable lessons about trust and verification in professional relationships. While I'm still somewhat haunted by how easily I was manipulated by someone I respected, I've learned to maintain healthy boundaries even with mentors and colleagues I admire. Today, 3 years later, I run my own team at Hamilton. And yes, I mentor junior advisors, but with transparency, proper boundaries, and regular check-ins with management. Breaking the cycle of toxic mentorship may be the most important achievement of my career. Sweet dreams, everyone, and remember that sometimes the people closest to us harbor the darkest secrets. But don't let these stories make you paranoid. Most people are genuinely good. Though if you enjoyed these tales of betrayal and revenge, make sure to subscribe for more Reddit dramas next week. I've got a collection of workplace nightmares that will make tonight's stories look tame by comparison. Until next time, sleep tight.